learning new details back in Shreveport, Louisiana, that left 8 children dead and a father accused of executing 7 of his own children.
Yeah.
You could see in his eyes, nothing behind the eyes, dead behind the eyes, no soul, NPC, non-player character. He didn't have one.
We can confirm the suspect in these 8 homicides is Shamar Elkins. He is believed to be the man responsible for this heinous act. I can tell you that 7 of the 8 children that were killed are believed to be his children. We are still working to determine a complete motive and understanding as to why this happened, but it is domestic in nature. The mother of the children was also shot and had very serious injuries, although we are hopeful she will recover. There's another female that was in this residence that has life-threatening injuries. We are hopeful that she will pull through, and right now we are still working to come up with an exact motive as to what led to this. But we do, we really want to thank the neighboring agencies for their assistance in this case.
At 6:01 in the morning, on April 19, 2026, a woman called 911 from a rooftop. She had just jumped out of a window to escape what was happening inside the home below her. She told the dispatcher a family member was inside. He had shot everyone. Shreveport police arrived at the 300 block of West 79th Street minutes later. What they walked into, Shreveport police spokesperson Chris Bordelon would later describe as blood and bodies everywhere. 8 children shot dead. The youngest, 3 years old. The oldest, 11. Most of them, according to the coroner's office, shot in their sleep. The man responsible was their father, 31 years old, 7 years in the National Guard. A UPS worker, neighbor waved at him from across the street. The evening before, he had taken his eldest daughter to dinner, posted about it on Facebook. The morning after, she was one of the dead. And here is what this case is really about. Because Shamar Elkins should never have had access to a firearm. Not in 2026. Not in 2025. Not since 2019, when a Louisiana court put that on record. He had made a death threat against his wife and children 3 years before that morning. It was never reported. He had been discharged from a VA psychiatric facility weeks before the shooting. He had called his mother 14 days earlier, crying, telling his stepfather, "Some people don't come back from their demons." No welfare check was made. No crisis line was called. And on the morning of April 19th, divorce papers were sitting in a courthouse, ready to be signed. The very next day. This is not a story about a man who snapped. This is a story about every system that was supposed to catch this. Welcome to True Crime Stories by Cole. Today's case. Shamar Elkins. The Shreveport Massacre. April 19, 2026. The deadliest mass shooting in America this year. The deadliest in Louisiana history. And one of the most devastating systemic failures this country has ever been forced to look at. If you are new here, hit subscribe right now. We don't do surface level on this channel. We go deeper than the headlines. We go deeper than the news cycle. We go all the way to the answers that no one else is asking for. And before we get into it, drop a comment below. Tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. No. Let us get into it. There is something deeply unsettling about the way ordinary life can exist right next to something catastrophic. A man sits on a porch. Children play in the yard. A neighbor walks by and waves. Nothing feels wrong. Nothing looks wrong. And that is precisely the thing that will haunt everyone who knew Shamar Elkins for the rest of their lives. Because nothing looked wrong. Right up until everything was. Shamar Dwan Elkins was born on December 7, 1994, in Shreveport, Louisiana. He grew up in Cedar Grove, the same Northside neighborhood where this story ends. His biological mother, Mahalia Elkins, was a teenager when she had him. She was also battling a crack cocaine addiction. She could not raise him. So she didn't. A family friend named Betty Walker stepped in. Walker became the woman who actually raised Sheamar. She was his stability, his structure. The person who showed up. Mahalia and Sheamar eventually reconnected years later, once he was already an adult. Once he was already a soldier. But the early years, the years that shape a person, those belonged to Betty Walker and Cedar Grove. At 18 years old, Shamar Elkins enlisted in the Louisiana Army National Guard. He served for 7 years. His roles, Signal Support System Specialist and Fire Support Specialist, involved weapon systems, coordinating firepower, and functioning under extreme pressure. These were not desk jobs. These were roles that required discipline, precision, and the ability to stay calm when everything around you is not. He was never deployed overseas. In August 2020, he left the Guard as a private, the lowest enlisted rank, and returned to civilian life in Cedar Grove. 7 years of military training. Then a return to the same neighborhood he came from. No documented transition support on public record. No bridge between what he had been trained to do and the life he was now supposed to live. He went to work at UPS. His co-worker, Willie Vasher, spoke to the New York Times after the shooting. He described Elkins as someone who appeared to be a devoted family man. Hard-working. Present. The kind of person you work alongside every day and think you know. But Vasher noticed something he could not explain away. Elkins had a bald spot on his head. Not from genetics. From stress. He pulled his own hair out throughout the workday. Strand by strand. Every single shift. His family had noticed it too. Everyone around him could see it. The physical evidence of a man quietly coming apart at the seams. And yet, nobody asked what it meant. Nobody sat down with Shamar Elkins and said the words out loud. By 2026, Shamar Elkins had 2 households. He was married to Shaniqua Pugh, with whom he shared 4 children. He also had a previous marriage to Christina Snow, with whom he had 3 more children. Christina lived on Harrison Street, 1 block away from the West 79th Street home where Elkins lived with Shaniqua. 2 families. 1 block apart. 7 children between them. Financial pressure stretched across both homes. And a criminal history that most people in his life knew absolutely nothing about. Here is where the story begins to shift. Because Shamar Elkins was not simply a man under pressure. He was a man with a documented legal record that should have changed everything about what happened on the morning of April 19th. A record that sat in a courthouse database while the people closest to him waved at him from across the street. The question is not whether the warning signs existed. They did. The question, and this is the one that this case forces us to sit with, is how a man with that record, that history, those documented red flags, ended up in a home on West 79th Street with 2 weapons. And we are going to walk through every single answer. But before we do, we need to understand who Shamar Elkins was to the people who loved him. Because that is the part the headlines always skip. And it matters more than most people realize. We will get to that in a moment. If you are watching this and you are new to this channel, subscribe right now. Hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what this case is really about. To understand what happened on April 19, 2026, you have to understand the world Shamar Elkins was living inside in the months before it. It was not simple. It was not the picture of a man with one life quietly unraveling. It was a man managing 2 separate families, 2 sets of children, 2 women who had each built something with him, all of it contained within a single block of Cedar Grove, Shreveport. Shaniqua Pugh was Elkins's wife. They married in April 2024. Together, they had 4 children. They lived at the home on West 79th Street, the address that would become a crime scene before the city finished waking up on a Sunday morning. Christina Snow was Elkins's ex-wife. They had been married before Shaniqua. Together, they had 3 children. Christina lived on Harrison Street, 1 block away. Close enough that the children of both households knew each other. Close enough that the geography of Elkins's life folded back on itself every single day. 7 children. 2 mothers. 1 block. And Elkins in the middle of it all, working at UPS, pulling his hair out strand by strand every shift, holding 2 households together with what everyone around him would later describe as an intense, consuming need to keep everything under his control. That word, control, is important here. We will come back to it. In 2023, something shifted. Shaniqua began considering leaving. According to Betty Walker, the woman who raised Elkins and who spoke directly to the New York Times, when Shaniqua raised the possibility of leaving and taking the children, Elkins's reaction was not grief. It was not desperation. It was something far more specific. He told her directly, if she tried to leave, he would kill her. He would kill the children. And he would kill himself. That is not a statement made in passing. Researchers who study intimate partner homicide are consistent on this point. Explicit, pre-separation death threats are among the strongest statistical predictors of lethal violence. They are not impulsive outbursts. They function as declarations, a partner establishing that the relationship ends on his terms, or it does not end at all. Walker said she ultimately let it go when Elkins told her he was just playing. She believed him. Or perhaps more accurately, she needed to believe him. Because when you love someone, and when the alternative is too large to hold, sometimes you take the answer that lets you keep going. Shaniqua stayed. They married the following year, in April 2024. Now think about that. She stayed. She married him. And the threat, that specific, detailed, targeted threat against her life and the lives of her children, never reached a police officer. Never appeared in a court document. Never entered any domestic violence database anywhere. It stayed inside the family. Private knowledge, carried by the people closest to them, with no legal system ever made aware of it. By early 2026, Shaniqua had filed for divorce. Her brother-in-law, Troy Brown, confirmed to CNN that the filings cited infidelity. The details of what happened inside that marriage are not fully public. But the legal process had started. The papers were in the system. And a court date had been set. Monday, April 20th, 2026. The morning after the shooting. Troy Brown told reporters that in the weeks leading up to April 19th, Elkins was visibly distressed about the marriage ending. He told his brother, quote, "Bro, I don't want to lose my wife." Brown said Elkins appeared to be struggling, but also appeared to be managing. He seemed like a man trying to hold on, not a man preparing to let go of everything. But there is something that behavioral research on domestic violence documents with striking consistency. The period of attempted separation is statistically the most dangerous time for victims and their children. Not because it causes rage, but because for a certain kind of person, the kind who experiences a relationship as something they own rather than something they share, the act of leaving represents the ultimate loss of control. And for Shamar Elkins, control was everything. What no one in that household knew, not Shaniqua, not Troy Brown, not Betty Walker, was that the man they were trying to reach had already been to a psychiatric hospital. He had already attempted to take his own life. He had already been discharged back into the exact same circumstances that had broken him in the first place. And 14 days before the shooting, he had called his mother and told her he was drowning. That phone call is where this story takes its darkest turn. And we are going to walk through it, every detail, right after this. April 5th, 2026. Easter Sunday. Shamar Elkins called his mother, Mahalia, and his stepfather, Marcus Jackson. When they picked up, he was crying. He told them that Shaniqua had filed for divorce. He told them he was overwhelmed. He told them his thoughts had gone somewhere dark. His stepfather tried to pull him back. Tried to offer him something to hold on to. The kind of words a parent reaches for when they don't know what else to give. Elkins listened. And then he said, "Some people don't come back from their demons." The call ended. No crisis line was contacted. No welfare check was requested. No one called police. Now, and this is important, the family's response was not unusual. As the New York Times noted in its reporting, most families respond exactly this way. Because most of the time, a call like that does not produce what happened here. Most of the time, a person in pain reaches out and then finds their way through it. The family could not see the full picture. They only had the piece of it that was standing in front of them. But here is what the family couldn't see. 3 months earlier, in January 2026, Shamar Elkins had checked himself into the Veterans Affairs Hospital in Shreveport for a mental health evaluation. Betty Walker confirmed to the New York Times that this came after a suicide attempt. He recognized something was wrong. He went voluntarily. He stayed approximately 10 days. And then he was discharged. Troy Brown told reporters that when Elkins returned home, he seemed better. He was talking about being a good father, about getting things right. Brown asked him directly whether he needed to go back to the hospital. Elkins said he was fine, that he would just deal with it. "I wish he went ahead and gotten the help," Brown said. The VA has not publicly addressed what Elkins's discharge assessment contained, whether a lethality screening was conducted, whether the pending divorce was flagged as a risk factor, whether his 2019 firearms conviction was cross-referenced with his discharge plan. Those questions remain unanswered. What is documented is this: the VA discharged Shamar Elkins back into a marriage in active dissolution, financial pressure stretched across 2 households, and no documented follow-up support structure on public record. The same conditions that produced the crisis in the first place, unchanged. Now we come to the criminal record. And this is the piece that reframes everything. In 2019, Shamar Elkins was arrested near Caddo Magnet High School in Shreveport. According to a police report cited by local news outlet KTBS, he pulled a handgun from his waistband and fired 5 rounds at a vehicle approximately 300 feet from the school while children were present outside. He claimed the driver had pointed a weapon at him first. He pleaded guilty to illegal use of a weapon. He received 18 months of probation. And under Louisiana law, that conviction legally barred Shamar Elkins from possessing any firearm until at least 2029. Not a gray area. Not a technicality. A hard legal prohibition on record in the state of Louisiana. On the morning of April 19, 2026, Elkins had 2 weapons: a small-caliber handgun used in the first part of the attack, and a Mossberg rifle-style pistol, what police described as an assault pistol, that he was still carrying when officers confronted him in Bossier City hours later. 2 days after the shooting, on April 21st, the United States Department of Justice provided the first public answer to how at least one of those weapons reached him. Federal agents charged Charles Ford, a 56-year-old Shreveport resident and himself a convicted felon, with being a felon in possession of a firearm and making a false statement to federal investigators. ATF agents traced the rifle, confirmed to be a .22 caliber Mossberg 715P, to its original legal purchaser. That person identified Ford as the individual she had given the weapon to while she was in the hospital. Ford initially denied ever having the gun when agents first interviewed him. He later admitted he kept it under the seat of his truck. He admitted he believed Elkins had taken it from him. Ford told investigators he confronted Elkins about the missing weapon. Elkins became defensive. Ford let it go. He let it go. Charles Ford now faces up to 15 years for the possession charge and 5 additional years for lying to federal agents. The U.S. Attorney confirmed the investigation into the full firearms acquisition chain is ongoing. How Elkins obtained the handgun has not yet been publicly addressed. 2 convicted felons. 1 illegal weapon passed between them. A legal prohibition on the books since 2019. And a system that never connected those dots until after 8 children were dead. But here is what we still don't know. We know how the rifle reached Elkins. We do not yet know how long he had been planning what he did with it. We do not know exactly when the decision was made. We do not know what happened in the hours between 9 p.m. on April 18th, when Troy Brown left for his night shift, and 5:55 a.m. on April 19th, when the first 911 call came in from a rooftop. Those hours are not fully documented in any public source. What we do know is where those hours ended. And that is where we are going next. There are hours in this case that no public record fully accounts for. The last confirmed normal moment, if you can call it that, was around 9 p.m. on the night of Saturday, April 18th. Troy Brown, Shaniqua's brother-in-law, who lived in the West 79th Street home, was getting ready to leave for his night shift at work. He told the Associated Press that Elkins seemed calm, relaxed, even joking around as Brown moved his car out of the driveway to make space. Brown's nephew, 10-year-old Marcaden Pugh, cousin to Elkins's biological children, was alive inside the house when Brown drove away. Marcaden did not survive the night. Earlier that same afternoon, neighbor Freddie Montgomery had walked past the West 79th Street house and seen Elkins sitting on the front porch, watching the children play in the yard. The two men waved at each other. Montgomery told CNN there was nothing in that moment that suggested anything was wrong. And that is the detail that is almost impossible to hold in your mind. Because behavioral research on familicide documents, consistently, across case after case, is that perpetrators in these situations rarely act impulsively. The violence is planned. The perpetrator typically presents as calm in the hours before. Sometimes unusually calm. The trigger is not sudden rage. It is the quiet arrival of a point of no return. A court date. A finalization. A legal process that is about to make something permanent and irreversible. The divorce papers were ready. The court date was the next morning. Somewhere between 9 p.m. and 5:55 a.m., Shamar Elkins made his way to Harrison Street first. Christina Snow's home. His ex-wife. The mother of 3 of his children, Braylon, age 5. Kadarian, age 6. Soraya, age 11. He knocked on her door before sunrise. He shot her 9 times. He took all 3 of her children and drove 1 block to West 79th Street. Christina Snow survived. Her aunt, LaShawn Berry, told CNN that after being shot, Christina used Siri to call 911. She was conscious enough, despite 9 gunshot wounds, to give investigators a full account of what had happened at her door before sunrise. At West 79th Street, inside the home where Shaniqua Pugh lived with their 4 children, along with her sister Keosha and Keosha's 12-year-old daughter, the attack continued. Shreveport police received the first call at 6:01 a.m. A woman on the roof. Someone had been shot inside. The caller was Keosha Pugh, Shaniqua's sister. She and her 12-year-old daughter had climbed out of a window and onto the roof to escape. Both jumped. Keosha broke her pelvis and her hip. Her daughter sustained injuries but survived. Keosha made those calls while the attack was still happening inside the home below her. Think about that for a moment. Police spokesperson Chris Bordelon confirmed that most of the children appeared to have been shot in their sleep. Most were shot in the head. 7 of the 8 were found inside the home. The 8th, one of the children, was found dead on the back roof. Bullet holes were recovered from the rear door. Evidence that at least some of the children had tried to escape and didn't make it out. They were between 3 and 11 years old. Officers arrived on scene and immediately began linking the West 79th Street address to Harrison Street. By 6:20 a.m., police had received information that Christina Snow's 3 children might be inside a carjacked red Kia Sportage that Elkins had taken after leaving the scene. Officers pursued the vehicle. By 6:40 a.m., they confirmed the car was empty. Christina's 3 children were not in that vehicle. They were already gone. At 6:29 a.m., officers engaged Shamar Elkins on Brompton Lane in Bossier City. He was pronounced dead at the scene at approximately 7:03 a.m. The Caddo Parish Coroner's Office confirmed all 8 children were killed at the West 79th Street address. The Caddo Parish Coroner noted that the 8 children's deaths more than doubled the total number of homicides in Shreveport and Caddo Parish for the entire year. Their names were
Jayla Elkins, age 3, Shayla Elkins, age 5, Kayla Pugh, age 6, Layla Pugh, age 7, Marcaden Pugh, age 10, Soraya Snow, age 11, Conundrum Snow, age 6, Braylon Snow, age 5, and to all of their families. So before I go on, will you just pause for a minute for a moment of silence as we honor them?
all of them gone before the city finished waking up on a Sunday morning. But here is the part of this case that does not end with a timeline. The part that is still unfolding. Still producing court dates and federal charges and questions that no investigation has yet answered publicly. Because Shamar Elkins is dead. But the systems that failed those 8 children, those are still very much alive. And that is exactly where we are going next. Step back from the names, the addresses, the 911 calls, the coroner's report, and look at the complete picture. Because when you lay it out, all of it, in sequence, what you are looking at is not just the story of one man and what he did. You are looking at the story of every system that was supposed to catch this, and didn't. There were 5 data points sitting in the public record before April 19, 2026. The first was a 2019 weapons conviction that legally barred Shamar Elkins from possessing any firearm until at least 2029. That was on file in the state of Louisiana. Court record. Public document. The second was a VA hospitalization in January 2026 following a confirmed suicide attempt. That was inside the Veterans Affairs system. A mental health evaluation. An inpatient stay of approximately 10 days. A discharge back into the same environment that produced the crisis. The third was a pending divorce with a finalization court date set for the very next morning. That was in the court system. Filed. Scheduled. A date on a calendar. The fourth was a death threat, specific, detailed, directed at his wife and children, made in 2023. That was in private family knowledge. Never reported. Never filed. Never entered into any system. The fifth was a brother-in-law living in the same house, watching the deterioration up close, asking Elkins directly whether he needed to return to the hospital, and being told he was fine. 5 data points. Spread across law enforcement records, the VA system, the court system, and private family knowledge. Never connected. Never assembled into a single risk picture. Never acted on before April 19th. Shreveport Police Chief Wayne Smith said at his Monday press conference that the violence stemmed from a domestic dispute. He also added, and this is a significant detail, that the chances were good this was not the first time. Implying prior incidents. Incidents that went unreported, undocumented, invisible to every system designed to track them. There are questions this case raises that go far beyond Cedar Grove. Should a VA discharge for a veteran with an active firearms prohibition and a contested divorce trigger automatic cross-agency notification? Should a domestic violence lethality screening be mandatory when a divorce is filed against someone with a prior weapons conviction? What would it take to connect those systems in real time, before a Sunday morning, not after? Those are policy questions, and they do not have easy answers. But they are questions that 8 families in Shreveport are now living inside permanently. Questions that Shaniqua Pugh, who is still recovering from multiple gunshot wounds to her face and stomach, will carry forward. Questions that Christina Snow, who was shot 9 times and was discharged from the hospital just days later, going directly to a vigil for her murdered children, will carry forward. Those women survived. Their children did not. There is also something important to understand about the community surrounding this case, because it is a dimension that has entered the national conversation in the weeks since April 19th. Researchers and advocates have pointed out that black women in the United States experience intimate partner violence at disproportionately high rates. More than 4 in 10 black women experience physical violence from an intimate partner during their lifetimes, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control. And yet the resources, the intervention systems, the early warning frameworks, they are not equally accessible or equally responsive across all communities. In March 2026, 1 month before the massacre, the Shreveport City Council voted to withdraw from a partnership designed to operate a domestic violence resource center. 1 month before 8 children were killed in a domestic violence event. That timing is not a cause, but it is a context. As of April 24, 2026, for investigations remain open. The ATF Full Firearms Procurement Inquiry. The federal prosecution of Charles Ford. The Louisiana State Police officer-involved shooting investigation, because whether Elkins died from a self-inflicted wound or from officer gunfire has not been officially confirmed. And the Shreveport Police Department's active motive investigation. None have produced final public findings. The Louisiana Governor's Love One Louisiana Foundation has covered all funeral costs for the 8 children. Both surviving women are expected to recover physically. 2 community funds have been established, one for survivors and one for domestic violence prevention. Joint funerals have been planned for the 8 children. 8 candles on billboards across Shreveport and Bossier City. One for each of them. There is a question that retired FBI behavioral expert Jason Pack described in his analysis of cases like this one. He said that violence like this follows what experts call a pathway, a process that develops over time rather than in a single moment. The perpetrator builds a narrative where he is the victim, where the people around him are responsible, and he stops trying to resolve the grievance and starts feeding it. Somewhere along that pathway, there were moments where a different outcome was possible. A report filed, a flag raised, a system that checked one record against another. We cannot say with certainty which moment would have changed it, but we know the moments existed. The U.S. attorney on this case, Zachary Keller, said something after the Charles Ford charges were announced that is worth sitting with. He said that Elkins's death means the community will never see him face justice. That the hope, the only justice available now, is accountability for those who made it possible for him to have that weapon in his hands. That accounting is still being written. When the Ford prosecution moves forward, when the firearms trace is made fully public, when the VA's role in this case is formally examined, when the final investigation findings are released, we will be here. This channel covers every case the same way. Verified sources. Confirmed facts. Open questions named as open questions. Nothing added for shock value. Nothing left out for comfort. Those 8 children, Jayla, Shayla, Braylon, Kayla, Kadarian, Layla, Marcaden, and Soraya, deserved every single year that was taken from them on that Sunday morning. That is why we tell these stories the way we do. If this is the kind of coverage you want, subscribe to True Crime Stories by Cole. Hit the like button. Share this video. Because stories like this one do not stay in the news cycle long enough. And they should. Drop a comment below. Tell us where you are watching from. Tell us what part of this case you think deserves more attention: the gun access failure, the VA discharge, the 2023 threat that was never reported, or something else entirely. We will read every single one. And we will be back when this case moves forward.